Hey everybody, this is Raymond L. Today I just want to encourage you and remind everyone that the battle is the Lord. Especially when you're facing a situation or a circumstance and you're trying to do the right thing and problems keep coming up, you got to realize that the battle is the Lord. And I'm going to read from 1 Samuel 17:45 and talk about David and Goliath this morning. But after I read this, I'm going to back up and kind of fill into the story. So 1 Samuel 17:45, David replied to the Philistine, "You come to me with the sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's army, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us." And I'm reading for the New Living Translation today. And this was David facing the Goliath, the Philistines, and David was talking to this Philistine, saying, "You coming at me with a sword and spear and javelin, and I come at you in the name of the Lord of heaven's army, the God of the armies of Israel. You defied the God of the army of Israel, and today I'm going to cut off your head." Now that's bold coming from a shepherd's boy who only had a stick and five smooth stones. But that just showed that David was completely focused on God and not on the giant. And sometimes we need to put our focus on God when we are facing life battles or our giant situations. Like I said, I'm not going to talk behind every verse. I'm going to read some verses and then I'm going to just kind of summarize it. So let's back up and get the gist of the story. First Samuel 17:3. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hill with the valley between them. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistines' rank to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor and carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer walked ahead of him, carrying a shield. Goliath stood and shouted across to the Israelites, "Why are you all coming out to fight?" he called. "I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slave. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me." When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. They were focused on the giant and how he looked. They were not focused on God. And it's very intimidating because the man was over 9 feet tall. And he had all this armor on. And he even had armor on his legs. His spear was intimidating. Everything was intimidating. And he shouted a taunt, say, we don't have to fight. Our armies don't have to fight each other. Just let, I'm the champion of the Philistine. You send me a champion and let it be 1-on-1. And if I kill him, you be our slaves. If he kill me, we'll be your slaves. And he said, "Today I defy the armies of Israel. Send me a man who will fight me." And when Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. So they was intimidated by this giant. They wasn't focused on God. They was focused on man and how it looked. And when they just looked at him, they were terrified. They were deeply shaken. They said, "Ain't no way we could defeat this over 9 foot tall man." But David knew what God could do, so David chose to focus on God. So we're gonna go a little bit further in this story. But this man was terrified. The army of Israel was scared, and David had just happened to come and see and hear the army cursing. I mean, not the army, but hear the Goliath cursing the armies of Israel, and and challenging them to fight. And Saul had put out a reward. So anybody who fight this Philistine will be rewarded with my daughter and a lot of more stuff. But when nobody go to fight, and David wasn't even in the army, but David had his focus on God. So let's see what David told Saul. 1 Samuel 17:32. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. So David was focused on God. Then 1 Samuel 17:33. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You are only a boy, and he had been a man of war since his youth. So Saul was focused on everything else but God. He said, don't be ridiculous. Ain't no way you could win this battle. You just a little boy. You're only a boy. And he's been a man of war since his youth. But guess what? 1 Samuel 17:34. But David persisted. 1 Samuel 17:34. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. He said, when a lion or a bear come to steal them, let me read that again. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goat. He said, when a lion or bear come to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lion and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he had defied the army of the living God. So David said, I was out there watching sheep, and if a lion or bear came to get a sheep, I will rescue the sheep, and I will go after it. I will take the sheep out of the lion's mouth, and if he turn on me, with a club I had, I beat the lion to death. And said, I have beat both bear and lion to death with a club. God had gave me the victory over the bear and the lion, like 1 Samuel 17:37. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from the Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. So David was focused on God. He said, I know God brought me through a lot of stuff. I know I wasn't supposed to be able to beat a lion and a bear with a club, but God gave me them victories in the past, and the same God that gave me the victory, he will give me the victory over this giant, over this Philistine. So let's go a little further. Just remember, when you when you talk like David talked, you cannot lose focus. Because even though David had said that, David had all the faith, he still had to fight the battle. He still had to face the giant. So sometimes we be praying for a miracle, but sometimes we have to face our giant or our situation head on. So, and God will be with us. So 1 Samuel 17:38, then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like. He had never worn such things before. I can't go in these, he protested. So I'm not used to them. So David took them off again. So David wasn't focused on anything but how God told him to fight. David said, I can't fight like you could fight. If you want to give me your stuff to fight with, you ain't even confident in the stuff that you gave me, because you won't fight the giant, in so many words. So I can't wear these. I'm not used to these. Now, if this worked for you, go fight the giant and face the giant. But it didn't work for Saul. So what did David do? David was still focused on God and said, I know how God gonna give me this victory. It's gonna seem impossible. So 1 Samuel 17:40. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a spring and put them in his shepherd's bag. Then armed only with a shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistines. So he had 5 stones, a slingshot, and a stick. Goliath walked out towards David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at this ruddy-faced boy. 1 Samuel 17:43. Am I a dog? He roared to David. that you come at me with a stick? And he cursed David by the names of his God. Come over here and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals. Goliath yelled. So David could have very easily lost his focus because he didn't have, he could have been intimidated by how big this giant was, by his armor bearer, and by the everything he had on. And then the giant was said, "Am I a dog? You coming at me with a stick?" Then the giant said, "Come on, I'm just gonna go ahead and kill you." But let's look at what David said. 1 Samuel 17:45. David replied to the Philistines, "You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of heavens, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled." So David knew that even though he was talking about him, he was really talking about God. He was really defying God. And you trying to do right, people talking about you in your face, sometimes they just talking about God, the God in you. Some people hate the God that's in you. 1 Samuel 17:46. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head, and then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. If I can defeat you with 5 stones and a stick and a slingshot, the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. I am doing this because you are defying God. The battle is not mine. The battle is God. All God needs is for someone to step up and face the giant. 1 Samuel 17:47. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle. The battle is the Lord. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. So David realized that it was the Lord's battle, and that God will give him the victory. And just to sum it up, God gave him the victory. If you heard the story of David and Goliath, so David had 5 smooth stones, and he took one of the stones and, used a slingshot, and he hit the giant right in the head, in the forehead, right between the eyes, basically, the place where wasn't no armor on the giant. That's where David hit him. And David had a stick. But guess what? When the giant fell, because David hit him right there, the spot that, it's just like the Lord just aimed that rock in the right place. David went and took the giant's sword and cut the giant's head off and gave Israel the victory. So don't lose focus. Well, I can't do this because I don't have that. And David had a slingshot, 5 stones, and a stick, and he defeated a giant. And other people had offered him other stuff that they wasn't using. And David said, if this is so good, if your advice is so good, why are you sitting in a tent afraid to face the giant, and you want to tell me how to face the giant? But don't lose focus. You got to do things God's way. David defeated Goliath. In the army of Israel celebrated. They fought and they beat the Philistines. They had a great battle that day, but they wouldn't have had a great victory if they never fought the fight. So remember, we have some fights to fight. We have some fights that we must face, fights to fight. We have some battles to win, but we can't win the battle if we don't fight the fight. So just remember, the battle is the Lord. The battle is the Lord. Keep doing right. Keep standing for right. Keep trying to live your life. There will be some giants out there, but just keep doing right and realize that you got to stand. But the real battle is the Lord. The one who's going to give you victory over your giants and over your situation is the Lord. So focus on God. Y'all have a blessed day.